Welcome again to Cincy Hoops Talk. I'm your co-host, Rich Hoyt, once again joined by the great Rick Broering from NKYSportsblog.com. Today, we're going to recap what has gone on in high school basketball around the area this past weekend, both in northern Kentucky and greater Cincinnati areas. We'll have a few interviews with some of our local high school coaches. We'll recap some of the college action, specifically a couple of our local colleges. Miami, we'll hit on Thomas More a little bit. We'll look at the week ahead and the holiday season with all the tournaments and so forth. And Rick, you ready to roll?
Let's do it. We can start in northern Kentucky. And, you know, when you look at this Northern Kentucky high school basketball season, the way it's sort of shaped up, we found a lot of things out over the last week or so, I'd say, since we last talked. First, CovCap, the team that started off pretty slow, is starting to get things going. I mentioned this on Twitter the other night. If I'm in the 35th district right now, and the 35th district, as always, is once again the top district in Northern Kentucky, you've got CovCaf, you've got Holy Cross, you've got Holmes, who are all, usually capable of winning the region, and only two of them even make it to the regional tournament. Right. This year is going to be the same way. Covington Catholic was looking like a distant third early, but they've won 4 in a row, 6 out of their last 7. You usually need those practice days to get better and need to be in the gym working on things. But Coach Ruthsatz has really found a lot of success recently just getting his guys game experience. And what that's done is you've gone from a team with a point guard who can really score and do a lot of things to a team that's starting to form some roles around that talented point guard. And, of course, his son, Nick Ruthsatz, is the talented point guard. He continues to score the ball a lot for him, but they've got another great shooter in the backcourt with Nick Frederick. They've got some big guys inside with Ryan Hayden. Max Pauley is starting to play well inside, so that's really helping them out and giving them some energy, and that's helped them out defensively. They beat St. Xavier on Friday, and then they turned right around and beat Campbell County on Saturday in an early 6 o'clock game, and of course, They gave up a lot of points to Nate McGovney, Campbell County star, but he had to work for it. They went boxing one against him, made him do some different things, and worked really hard for those points. So CovCap, a team that is definitely on a roll here and playing better.
I was really, you mentioned it. If I'm a coach, especially a first-year coach at CovCap like Ruthsatz is, I want practice time. And, with all of the games they play, I think they probably played more games than any team in the area at this point with 7 games. Maybe they're starting to turn in the corner because of the teams that they played have really challenged them and made them better. But yeah, I would, if I'm a coach, I think the more teaching time that I can have implementing my program, so forth. So impressive that CovCap's been able to do what they have here of late.
Yeah, and I think I completely get what you're saying about you need the practice time and everything. But I think he had done a good job of really getting the guys in the gym and implementing the system and getting them to sort of, I guess, understand where they're supposed to be and everything. But what they needed was for everyone to sort of learn how to play in that system and play fast and really play up tempo. And now you're seeing some guys start to have big offensive nights because maybe they get 3 or 4 steals that lead to run-out buckets. And, you're turning defense into offense. And now all of a sudden, CovCap's a dangerous team. And I think, if I'm Holy Cross and I'm Holmes, I'm sort of looking very closely at how CovCap's coming along here early because
that's going to be an interesting district.
It really is. They've turned it around quickly, and they're that's not a team I want to face necessarily when it comes tournament time. That's for sure. Moving on to another team in that district, Holy Cross is really looking like a serious regional contender, just coming off a state football title. It's pretty exciting times in Covington right now. They won 3 games since we last talked, beat Scott 96-74. Then came back, and this is what's really impressive to me. They beat Scott in an up-and-down, fast-paced game. Scott likes to pressure you and make you play full court. They scored 96 points, showed, hey, we're great at that. Then they came back and won a grinded-out game against Newcastle, 59-54, a game that I was at, and they had to play long stretches of the game without Antonio Campbell. And I think they sort of figured out when they don't settle for jump shots and they attack the basket and work it inside, and, of course, when Campbell's in the game, that obviously helps, but they're really able to score the ball a lot better. And they only scored 59 there. They had some droughts with Campbell out of the game, but they sort of figured out a way to win in that grinded-out style. So I'll talk about Newcastle a little bit more coming up, but that was a big win for them. And then they beat Collins on the quick turnaround. They played Saturday night, 61-42. 5 in a row for the Indians. Coach Getz has them playing pretty good basketball right now. Mm-hmm. Then you move on. Newcastle, the other team I just mentioned, that Holy Cross, got a big win over. They're 0-2 right now, but I've been impressed with them. They've played arguably the top 2 teams in the 9th region so far in Dixie and Holy Cross. They played both of them tough. They made second-half comebacks in both games. Now, the key for this team is, okay, you're sort of knocking some rust off. You're getting back into the swing of things. At some point, you got to start playing the full game because they got down to Holy Cross 10-0 before they scored their first basket. And you know, as a coach, you battle back. You're fighting in that huddle, each and every huddle. But guys get worn down when you're trying to make that big comeback the whole game, and you don't have it at the end of the game to finish.
Yeah, it is. It is difficult, and so sometimes you have that momentum, and it kind of carries you over the hump. But if you've got a team that you're fighting back against, it's pretty good. And they start to get that resistance, then they're going to kind of step up their game to where they need be. And you might be a step slow just from wasting your energy getting back in the game.
And that's exactly what happened against Holy Cross. They got down 10-0. They battle back in the second half. That they bring it right back to about tied, 1-point game, and then Holy Cross sort of finished off the game. It just seemed like Newcastle didn't quite have it left. But they'll be okay. I've been very impressed with freshman big man Drew McDonald. Mm-hmm. He's had 2 huge games against tough competition. He's going to be very good. And Coach Grant Brandon compared him to former star now at Jacksonville, Jake Geisler already. That's pretty high praise. But I have to admit, he's very similar. Great hands, great feet, moves really well, finishes everything around the basket, and good touch from mid-range. It looks like he might be able to step out in the future and even shoot some perimeter jump shots. So we'll keep an eye on Drew McDonald, Newcastle. I'd say, again, they might be the best 0-2 teams in the state, or the best winless team in the state even at this point. The game I went to on Friday night, Highlands versus Brossart, was an interesting one. I kind of went there because I felt Brossart was a much better team at this point. But I kind of said, you know what, this is a rivalry game. It's 2 Campbell County teams. They don't like each other a whole lot. Sometimes this one's a fun one because they're both, in the past, they've been both, keep it low scoring and play ugly style basketball. Highlands is trying to play up tempo this year. Brossart's still slowing it down. So I said, okay, let's go see how that one sort of turns out. And I'm glad I did. It was a close game, and Highlands really made a run and showed that Brossart's lack of guard play is kind of an issue for them. And they pressed them. They gave them some trouble in the backcourt. And Brossart had trouble early in the game finishing at the rim. They had the major size advantage, but they missed layups. They missed at point-blank range. And then they started turning the ball over a little bit. Highlands got hot. All of a sudden, Highlands had a 10-point lead in the third quarter, 48-38. Brossart finishes that game on like a 31-3 run and ends up winning 68-61. Great finish from the Mustangs, but finally what happened was they just went inside. They've got a 6'8 center in Joe Jennings, a 6'8 sophomore in Drew Burns, who's really coming around and looking like a beast underneath as far as rebounding and scoring and finishing through contact. And they sort of imposed their will down the stretch. I do have to mention, Brossart's guards struggled during that game, but Ben Ubel at the point guard has sort of given them a guy who understands what they need, even though he's maybe not the ideal point guard. He understands, okay, someone has to be that guy.
Right.
And he's tried to fill that role and step up and say, okay, maybe I have an open 3, but I'm not going to take it this time. We're going to work it into our strength and get it to our big guys down low. And that's what he did down the stretch. It really sort of calmed the team down and got them in the right mindset to finish the game off.
Just hearing some of the things you're talking about, I can't help but, like, 3 of the schools you mentioned, Holy Cross, Newcastle, and Highlands, those are 3 schools that all were expecting or made big football runs.
Yeah.
Newcastle, ended a little sooner than I think that I thought they would. But those are all football, successful programs that are just kind of coming around in basketball now.
Well, and the funny thing is, the schools you just named, Holy Cross, Newcastle, and even Highlands, are all 3 smaller schools that really rely on dual-sport athletes.
Yeah.
Newcastle and Holy Cross, you're talking both teams have a lot of football players on there. So, or I shouldn't say a lot, but a couple key contributors from the football team. So you sort of get that winning mentality, and I think it carries over sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Dixie, the top teams on my NKSB top 10 poll. They're 5-1. They picked up wins over Highlands, they picked up a win over Highlands 50-35 earlier in the week. And what really impressed me about that win was the defense, holding Highlands to 35 points. And Highlands is a team that wants to run up and down. Mm-hmm. You know, Dixie was up and down a little bit shooting shots. There were a lot of possessions, and yet Highlands only got 35 points. That showed me even though Dixie really didn't score the ball well and only had 50, they really locked up on the defensive end, which is good to see that they've sort of gained some toughness. Then on Saturday, they're at the King of the Bluegrass tournament. They lost to White Station from Memphis. They have the top, or one of the top, he's ranked number 20 right now in the nation in the 2014 class. Wings, LaRon Black, he's 6'7", just a sophomore, absolute stud. So they did a good job sort of limiting him. Parker Stansbury, I know, spent a lot of time guarding him. Mm-hmm. And now tonight they play Thomasville from Georgia here on Monday night, and he's got to go against the top player in the state of Georgia right now as well. So he's had some tough defensive assignments, but he's doing a good job.
I mentioned that King of the Bluegrass in my blog this week. That's one of the top holiday tournaments in the country. You get a lot of the best schools from the state of Kentucky and also from the country there, and a lot of talent there.
Yeah, it really is. And Jody Demling does an outstanding job of covering that. I was talking to him a little bit this weekend, and he says it's his favorite seat of the year to sit there and watch those games because it's such good competition.
Good old Fairdale, Kentucky. I've got relatives down in Fairdale.
That's right. And to finish that off, the thought about Dixie. I think this is great for them to play some top-notch competition from out-of-state teams they've never seen. Mm-hmm. They sort of have to quickly scout, read a scouting report from their coach just off of, one night of, hey, these are their guys. Go out here and do our best and sort of do what we do and focus on ourselves a little bit more as opposed to, sometimes when you're playing those teams in Northern Kentucky that you know so well, you're really focused on, okay, well, we got to do this to stop them one night, do this to stop the next team. Whereas you play a team you know nothing about, you're really focused on yourself and what you do well and get back to focusing on your offense and your defense. So I think that'll be great for Dixie going forward. And then finally, the 33rd district. We said it at the beginning when we first started these podcasts, and it's played out exactly like we talked about. Boone, Ryle, Cooper, and Connor. It's still so wide open. Boone's looking like the favorite team at 6-1. They're really the only team with a good record right now, but it's still tough to tell. Boone, of course, has wins over Ryle and Connor so far, I should say. They've yet to play Cooper. They're 6-1. Ryle has lost to Boone County and then lost to Connor, but they did beat Cooper. They're 3-3 right now. Then Cooper beat Connor, lost to Ryle, has yet to play Boone County. They're 3-3 as well. And then Connor has lost to Cooper, lost to Boone, and then comes back and beats Ryle this weekend on Saturday night. So
figure it out.
Yeah, it's just tough to really figure out. They're 2-5 overall. Now I will say, interesting. Cooper lost to Pendleton County 55-42, mm-hmm. And that sort of surprised me that it was that wide of a margin. I don't think that's a good loss for them to give up 55 to Pendleton County, as good of defense as they've been playing. And then Boone the other night got it handed to them by Covington Catholic. And we've talked about Covington Catholic playing better,
right,
but that still doesn't really coincide with what people are expecting out of them and them starting the season 6-0.
And Pendleton County beat Cuffcat a couple weeks ago.
Right, in 4 overtime games. So it's really tough to figure out right now in the 33rd district. I guess the point is these teams aren't consistent yet,
right,
but each of them have sort of some matchup problems that they can give some teams trouble. I'd say Cooper really does a good job of defending. Boone plays 3 guards, and their biggest player is a knockdown shooter from the outside, so they're a tough matchup problem. And then Ryle and Connor are just really scrappy teams. They have, some guys that just really get after you. Connor has maybe the best defender in the 9th region in Drew Barker, who's also a sophomore, a quarterback stud, getting recruiting looks from Wisconsin and Kentucky and schools of that nature. And then Ryle has a great guard in Tate Mullins, who's posting up this year. He's a combo guard, but he's going down on the post and using his strength down there. And they're doing a lot of different things with him. So all those teams still trying to figure out. None of them are consistent yet, but all of them could make a run come tournament time. So it's going to be fun to watch the 33rd district play.
Excellent. 33rd district and some of those other schools. Really, things are starting to get interesting. So that was your Northern Kentucky high school report from Rick Broering. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have the Greater Cincinnati High School report, as well as the answer to last week's trivia question. You're listening to Cincy Hoops Talk on cincyhoopstalk.com. Welcome back. This is Rich Hoyt, joined by Rick Broering, Cincy Hoops Talk. Let's give, first of all, Rick, the answer to last week's trivia question. A reminder of that question. There's a Cincinnati high school basketball coach, a state championship basketball coach in Ohio, that played basketball at Summit Country Day, and he played in a state championship game when he was in high school, and also played at Northern Kentucky University. The answer to that question is LaSalle's Dan Fleming. Coach Fleming played at Summit Country Day in the early 1980s, late 70s, early 1980s. Of course, has won 2 state championships at LaSalle, now 1996, and of course last year, 2011, had a really good career at Northern Kentucky University, too. Was a really good shooter there. So, Coach Fleming, the answer to this week's trivia question. Let's get into talking about some Cincinnati high school basketball at this point, and let's kick things off in the GCL, the Greater Catholic League. One of the divisional battles that I was really looking forward to all year long was going to be in the Central Division. That division consists of Roger Bacon, consists of Purcell Marion, Baden, and McNicholas. And, of course, Bacon has won that division the last 3 years. But I thought coming into this year it was going to be a lot more balanced than it had been in the past. Bacon lost all 5 starters from last year's team. They are coming off 2 regional final appearances in a row. And all 5 of those players that they lost, they're all playing college basketball at this point. So they lost a lot of talent. And, I thought this could be the year that run could be over for them. And McNicholas had their chance on Friday night at home against the Spartans. I attended that game, and I thought Roger Bacon did a really good job on Drew Hall, McNicholas's fine perimeter player. Hall's about a 6'3", 6'4" player, signed, of course, with Division II Maryville down in Tennessee. Really good shooter. Bacon held him to 3 points in the first half and kind of found some more shots in the second half. Tim Monahan, McNick's coach, found a way to get him a few more. And he ended up with 13 in the second half and 16 overall for the game. But he's a high-volume shooter. And I also thought that Bacon's pressure really bothered McNick. Brian Neal's team's going to get up after you full court, for 32 minutes. They forced a lot of turnovers. Some of them kind of careless on McNick's part, really sped them up and made them uncomfortable. Bacon got off to a double-digit lead in the second quarter. McNick made a nice run to cut that lead down to 1 right before the first half buzzer. And moving on to the second half, Bacon was able to extend that lead again before, again, McNicholas was able to come back. And they even took the lead briefly in the fourth quarter. Bacon made some plays down the stretch, though, including a couple nice defensive plays. It was kind of a funny game because I was sitting with Roger Bacon's athletics director, Joe Corcoran, and in the fourth quarter, Bacon was getting offensive rebound after offensive rebound. They were controlling possessions in their half. And, when McNick was able to get the ball up and get some shots, they were really quick. It was almost like one of those football games where the offensive team controls the time of possession. I looked at Joe and I said Bacon has had to have controlled the ball for 6 out of the 8 minutes in the fourth quarter. So they did a good job with that. They hung on to win the game. 42-40, a big GCL Central win for Brian Neal and his Spartans. And I had a chance to talk to Coach Neal this weekend. Joining us now is Brian Neal, head basketball coach, Roger Bacon Spartans. Coach Neal, big win at McNicholas, 42-40 on Friday night. Congratulations. I thought your full court pressure really bothered McNick a lot, really made them uncomfortable throughout the night.
Yeah, I think with caused 21 turnovers, and that was, a big part of the game plan was try to get them to speed up and play more of a full court game, where our athletes would help make a difference. Obviously, we didn't want to let Drew Hall get easy looks in their half court offense. Obviously, the 6'9" Ryan Coldiron presents a problem for us. So we wanted to try to make it a full court game as much as we could, and I think we were pretty successful at doing that for the most part. Like I said, caused 21 turnovers. I guess our only regret was a lot of those turnovers where the balls got thrown out of bounds instead of us being able to get steals and takeaways and convert them into baskets. So,
right.
That was one of the only bad spot about our pressure for the evening was we didn't get to convert it very often.
Right. I thought you guys did do a nice job on Drew Hall as well. I could tell the game plan was to face guard him and whoever was guarding him. I thought Eric Edwards did particularly a nice job against him. The game plan was just to not leave him at any time under any circumstance. Is that right?
That's exactly right. He was averaging 25 points a game and was probably averaging over 20 shots a game.
Mm-hmm.
And, our game plan was, hey, he's going to work for everything he gets. And we were able really to, I think, take away about 10 shots that he would normally get. And Eric certainly was a big part of that. And Eric gives us a good matchup. Eric, 6'4", good athlete, long reach. He did a great job on Drew. And then when other guys got switched onto him for whatever reason, we were really smart about staying attached to him as much as we could and really trying to limit the number of looks he got.
Right. Yeah, did a nice job there. You mentioned, your lack of size. You kind of touched on it there. You've also got a really young and inexperienced team. You graduated all 5 of your starters from last year. What kind of adjustments have you had to make coming into this season?
Well, there's a lot more teaching. That group I had last year, we had 8 seniors, including all 5 starters. All 5 kids playing college basketball. They were an experienced group. They had been with me for 3 years. They were a very well-seasoned group, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And last year, not that I didn't do any coaching, but a lot of it was done the 2 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where we are with this young group. With Eric and Jake and a couple other juniors and 5 sophomores and a freshman, we're finding ourselves really, really having to slow down things and be patient with those guys and
right.
make sure we're teaching every step of the way. And that's it's been a new, exciting, fun challenge for us. But it's obviously it comes with some frustrations at times. And, we just tell our guys, when they ask for the final score, they don't ask how old you are or how young you are or how much experience you have. They just want to know who wins and who loses. So that's not an excuse for us. Our goal is to win.
That's right. So you start the year 1-2, all in non-league play, and last week you went back-to-back GCL games to start your league play. Tuesday you had a come-from-behind win against McNick, and then you had the win. You had the come-from-behind win against Fenwick, and the win against McNick on Friday night. You've won 3 straight GCL Central titles, and I thought the GCL Central was going to be a pretty balanced division coming into this year. So getting off to a 2-0 start's got to bode well for you.
Well, I'm certainly happy about it. Because when you asked me who the favorite was, I probably would have told you McNick.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I kind of voted preseason disrespect to Baden or Purcell. But when I looked at, Emrich and Drew Hall and Ryan Cold Iron, and, I just felt like on paper they had a pretty talented group. Although when you look at what Baden's on right now, and they're a very, very senior-laden team,
right.
They seem to be playing pretty darn well. And, so we're obviously excited to be 2-0 at this point and sitting on top of the league, but we got a long, long way to go.
Yeah, it is a long way to go. Coach Neal, appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Good luck the rest of the year.
All right, Coach. Thanks.
So Eric Edwards led a balanced Roger Bacon attack against McNick on Friday night. Edwards had 10 points, 9 rebounds, and as Coach Neal mentioned, did a really nice job against McNick's star, Drew Hall.
Yeah, and you spent some time with this team in the summer. How impressed were you with the way they've sort of implemented that pressure attack? It seems like they've come a long way, and it sort of really changed the way they defend.
Yeah, it really has. With all of the, not just the experience they lost, but the size they lost last year. I think, Brian decided I need to do something in order to change the pace defensively, because in the GCL he knew he wasn't going to be able to, to have 6'1", 6'2" guys, line up against some of the bigger teams they're going to play across the GCL. So during the summer when he was putting it in, I know he talked to a lot of other coaches about what they do, with their pressure and so forth. A little ragged over the summer, but he wanted them to get to playing hard over the summer, and I think he's done a nice job in the first month or so of the season that they've had really to work with it. And their game on Friday night was one of those games where that kind of pressure won the game for them, because they just made McNick uncomfortable all night long.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much of a difference that makes sometimes when you go from guys just don't even realize, entry passes to the post. Everything changes when you put pressure on the ball. It makes everything tougher for teams to run their offensive systems.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it had. And high school basketball, when you compare it to college basketball, a college basketball coach, as long as he can go out and find the caliber players that he wants to put in his system, they're going to be, he's going to be able to run that offensive system that he wants to play consistently. Most of the time in high school, you're going to have different guys and different cycles from year to year. And high school coaches have to be a little bit more flexible sometimes. There are some that aren't and have still been successful doing what they do, but I think a lot of that has to do with how well they teach what they've taught. But when you go from being a team that, was 6'5" and 6'8" across the front line to 6'1", 6'2" guys, you've got to definitely be flexible. So
I agree completely. And I think sometimes when you talk about the best high school coaches, the ones that impress me the most are the ones that can take the different groups of kids each year, maybe change what they do a little bit, and still win games. And I'm a little more partial to those guys than the coaches that sort of say it's my way or the highway, and we only run a certain system, because I don't think that. I think sometimes kids get lost in the shuffle when you do that, and it's not fair to some kids that go to that school.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just because they didn't fit the criteria, they were never a big part of the team when they could have been somewhere else, and they didn't get to choose where they lived.
Sure.
So I really like to see coaches that'll say, hey, we've got some really talented players that do this. We're going to mold it around them. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and those coaches, I think, that might say my way or the highway, again, I think it goes back to how good are your players? And if you have really good players that can play that way all the time, but if you're going to have, less than talented teams,
right,
then you're going to have to be able to adapt, or else you're not going to, have the success that you might be able to. So,
I agree.
Moving on, in the GCL, over in the South, LaSalle and Moeller remain undefeated. After this past weekend, LaSalle won at St. Xavier, a big win for them, 53-39. Sophomore Jeffrey Larkin, a really talented player, had 19 points for the Lancers. Moeller was able to pull away late to beat Elder, 58-39. Josh Davenport continues on his nice season he's having. He has 22 points and 13 rebounds for Moeller. Moeller's going to face a big matchup this coming Friday night against Middletown. Middletown had their own really good game against Mason this past Friday night in Middletown. Mason was up 10 at the end of the first quarter in that game. Middletown was able to chip away at that lead throughout. They tied it going into the fourth quarter, and Middletown really controlled that quarter. They pulled away for a 72-58 win, so Josh Andrews having a good deal of success early on in his first season at the helm of the Middies. Vincent Edwards, the sophomore sensation, had 22 points for Middletown. Giovanni McKnight, 21. And Mark Fain chipped in 10 points off the bench for Middletown. And they had a big advantage on the boards against the Mason Comets, 48-24. It was a big night at Middletown as they honored the 40th anniversary of legendary Coach Paul Walker's 600th victory. Coach Walker, arguably the most successful coach in the history of Ohio high school basketball. Not all he had, I think he ended up with 695 wins. Not all of those were in the state of Ohio. He had some in the state of Kentucky as well. But he did win 5 state championships at Middletown in his time during the 40s, 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. I know Coach Walker's son, Tim, who I got to sit down with over this past summer. His son, Tim, was there. Really nice night honoring his father and the great success that he had there. And I'll tell you what, that town of Middletown, just visiting it is such an athletic, crazy town that when that football team has success, when that basketball team has success, and it would have been a fun time, I'm sure, to be in Middletown in the 50s, 60s during that era with Coach Walker.
No question. And I agree. I've had just brief experiences with Middletown covering football games and stuff, but this year they made a playoff run, and it's just cool to see everyone sort of gather around them and really support them. Like you said, it's a neat community as far as how they support their sports.
Yeah, and they all wear purple when they're having that success too. Also in the GMC this weekend, Fairfield remain undefeated. We talked to Tim Austin last week on the podcast. They are 5-0. They had wins over Hamilton and Centerville. Mike Anderson's Princeton Vikings, they're going to go into the 2012 calendar year unbeaten. They moved to 4-0 after a come-from-behind win at Coleraine on Friday night, 74-67. They will not be in action again until January the 3rd. Lakota West also remains unbeaten, but the Firebirds have only played 2 games to this point. They're going to face off one of the more interesting games this week against their school district rival, the Battle of Westchester. Lakota East and Lakota West will play on Tuesday night at East High School. Moving on to the CMAC, Withrow swept their weekend matchups by beating West High on Friday night 74-49. And they had a come-from-behind victory against Aiken Saturday night by a score of 61-55. That Aiken team is really interesting. They had late leads in both of their games last week against really good teams, both Middletown and Withrow. And those are 2 teams in my top 6 of the Cincy Hoops Talk Super 15. So that Aiken team, I think, is one that's, you can tell is really in a developmental process right now, but somebody to look out for in Division II.
Yeah, I think Aiken is just one of those teams when you sort of look at their talent, it's there. It's starting to emerge slowly in different places. They just can't put it together and sort of gel as a team yet.
Yeah.
But they're on the verge. I think you're right. Come tournament time, I don't think anyone wants to see them.
Yeah, and Paul Woodson, the transfer from Clark Montessori, has made a big difference as well.
Huge difference
against those those talented players from Middletown on Tuesday night. He had 18 points and 19 rebounds. So a really nice night for him.
And that's what he gives you. He gives you a guy that's big enough and super athletic enough to sort of compete with those top-tier talents at the other schools. So it makes them a very dangerous team.
Absolutely. Moving on in Greater Cincinnati, the CHL was on showcase at the Cintas Center on Saturday. Deer Park, Finneytown, Indian Hill, and Madeira all came away victorious on the home court of Xavier University. Madeira was led in their game, a 71-60 win over Marymount. They were led by Andrew Benintendi's 34 points. Benintendi really starting to heat it up for Jimmy Reynolds' team. That team is off to a 3-0 start in league play, all double-digit victories, including the one, like I mentioned, against Marymount on Saturday at the Cintas Center. In the FAVC, there were a couple big games on Friday. I talked about it in my weekend preview blog. Over in the Western Division, Ross traveled to Winton Woods. And back in the preseason, Ross coach Matt Wilhelm mentioned to me that Winton Woods still was the team to beat in that division until someone finally beats them. And his Ross Rams had the opportunity on Friday night. They fell to Donnie Gillespie's Warriors 54-50. I had a chance to catch up with Coach Gillespie after their victory on Friday. Joining us now is head coach of the Winton Woods Warriors, Donnie Gillespie. Coach Gillespie, congratulations on the 54-50 FAVC opening win over Ross on Friday night. Who played well for you Friday?
Friday, I thought we had high energy with number one, Zach McCorkle, my forward, senior captain. He played with a lot of energy inside as far as defending the big fella for Ross, who's been averaging, I think, close to 20 points a night. I thought he did a great job against him. His energy became somewhat contagious to some of my younger players. I thought Trent Donald did a great job as far as scoring for us, and I thought a few of the other young fellas did a nice job as far as defending when we made some adjustments, going into the zone, and various other things we had to change up.
Trent Donald's one of your few returning players. You mentioned you got a young team this year. Have you talked to him? You're relying on him a lot for his leadership this year.
I think that he has that varsity experience that he can bring to the table and help these young guys understand what it is to find success at the varsity level. And that's one thing I've conveyed to him several times.
You do have that young talent. Obviously, you lost a lot from last year, most notably Samaje Kristen, Xavier Bound. And Ross's coach, Matt Wilhelm, told me before the season started that you guys are still the team to beat in the FAVC West. And so until somebody is able to knock you off, you've had a great run in the FAVC. Is that how you looked at your team coming into this year?
Well, I told them, I said, every time we play a league game, that's going to be their top game on their schedule. We haven't lost a game in the last 2 years in the league, and that's something that we're pretty proud of. We know that, people are going to be gunning for us. We got that X on our back every time we step on the court for an FAV match. So we tell them, go into it with humility, but go into it with confidence and learn from each game and know that if you don't go out there and play hard every night, that team can beat you on any given night. So.
Great. Well, your schedule hasn't really done your young guys any favor to start the year. You're 3-1 to this point. You opened up with a tough loss to obviously a really good Moeller team, and then you're able to get some wins over Roger Bacon, and then Fern Creek, and now the big win over Ross. How do you think your team is progressing to this point?
After the Moeller loss, I told the kids that we had to find rhythm games, games that we started to figure out our identity of what kind of team we are. Mm-hmm. And after the last two matches, I'd say the Fern Creek game, the kids really started to find some confidence and success in the things we're doing. And then after the Ross game, I thought we took a step back early. We just didn't defend well, and I told them to be a successful team and to be a championship team, we've got to learn how to defend. And I thought second half we did some things that we kind of got our confidence and rhythm back. So to this point, I'm somewhat pleased, but also, I still know that we have a long way to get where we want to by the time tournament time hits.
Absolutely, still early in the year. Coach Gillespie, really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot, and good luck moving forward with the rest of the season.
I thank you. Appreciate it so much.
So that was Winton Woods, who moves their record to 3-1 on the year. Ross drops their first game this season. They're now 4-1. The other team in the FAVC West that's off to a great start so far is Norwood. Kevin Schulte's Indians are 5-0 after their 60-54 win against Harrison on Friday night. The other big FAVC battle this weekend was over in the Eastern Division. Brad Cupido's Turpin team came away victorious in a battle of the high schools in the Forest Hills School District. They beat Anderson. Turpin's now 3-0 after their 60-46 win against Frank Brandy's Anderson team. The Spartans will take that undefeated record into another FAVC East battle on Tuesday night when they face off against Joe Cameron's Milford team. The Eagles are also off to a 2-0 start in the Eastern Division. Over in the Miami Valley Conference, a big milestone was accomplished. Paul Andrews, Laughlin's head coach, won his 400th game on Friday night with a 72-32 victory over New Miami. Many of those victories, of course, came in his time as head coach of the Princeton Vikings. But this was really, I think, a great accomplishment for a great guy and a great coach. I had the fortune or misfortune of coaching against him a handful of times, and I thought Coach Andrews was a class act all the time. The very first, I think the only time I beat Laughlin when I was a head coach at Summit was the very first game we played against Laughlin. My first year, it was in December, and Laughlin was ranked in the top 10 in the state. And he had a big kid, went to Findlay. His name is leaving me at this point. Wilhite, Antoine Wilhite. He didn't start Wilhite, didn't play him for a half because of discipline reasons, And I just had a lot of respect for Coach at that point because he had some nice players, and he could have easily, just let his guys go out there and win and probably blow us out that game. But, there were more important things for him, and that was, instilling some discipline in his players and really doing things the right way. And I think he's done that, really done a great job in his time at Laughlin.
I think anytime you achieve a milestone like that, you're talking about 400 wins, you've got to do things the right way. And that's what's so impressive to me about those 400, 500, 600 win guys. It's just like, it seems like such almost an overwhelming accomplishment to someone, when you're starting out.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you can't get there by doing things the wrong way or it's just very impressive. You have to be extremely good at what you do to do it for that long at that high of a level.
Yeah, extremely good and extremely dedicated.
Well, that's what I mean by good, is that you really care about the kids, you really care about what you're doing, and you spend a lot of time.
Absolutely. Another big battle took place at Clark Montessori in the MVC on Friday night. The class of the MVC Gray, in my opinion, to this point, has been Clark, and then the class of the MVC Scarlet, Summit Country Day, they did battle. Michael Bradley Silver Knights came away with an impressive victory, 57-40. Jamie Mahafey's North College Hill Trojans also 5-0 after a win last Tuesday night against Seven Hills. We'll see really how good North College Hill is going to be over the Christmas break time after a Tuesday night battle against Newport Central Catholic, who we talked about earlier. They're going to visit one of the top Division II teams in the whole state of Ohio, Thurgood Marshall, right after Christmas break. So that'll certainly be a test for the Trojans.
Yeah, it's always been an interesting battle. North College Hill and Newcastle have had that sort of long-standing thing going back to the Keith Jackson, even, I remember, played back there when he was at Purcell. And correct?
Yeah, Keith Jackson played at Purcell.
When they were at Purcell, they did it. And then right after that, it seemed like North College Hill started showing up a lot at Newcastle. It was always weird to me why they played that game. I never really understood it, but they've had a home and home going for a long time, it seems like. And it'll leave for a year or two, but then it comes back. And it always ends up being a really good game for some reason, despite how good or bad the teams are. I don't know why that is, but the styles of the team just seem to clash really well, and it makes for a fun game.
You mentioned that, and I remember going to scout a game back in the early 2000s. When I was an assistant coach at Roger Bacon, I went to scout a Newcastle North College Hill game, and you're right, they have kind of gone back and forth playing each other for a little while now. Moving on over in the Southern Buckeye Conference, we'll head out east of Cincinnati a little bit. In the American Division, the Western Brown Broncos off to a 4-1 start. They share an unbeaten mark in Southern Buckeye play. They're 2-0 with Goshen and New Richmond. In the National Division of the Southern Buckeye, Blanchester's only blemish so far is to Western Brown. Mark Short's team is 5-1 overall this year. And then another first-year coach, Adam Weber, has his East Clinton team sharing 2-0 honors in the conference with Blanchester. A couple other teams from the greater Cincinnati area worth noting. Troy Holtry's Springboro team off to a 5-0 start after beating Xenia on Friday night. And again, I mentioned on the blog, you might see a lot of points scored. And Springboro came away with an 84-75 victory. 6'10 junior Maverick Morgan had 27 points for Springboro on the night, including converting 13 out of 15 from the free throw line. And the other team I want to mention, Franklin, they ran their record to 5-0 as well after their win against Bellbrook on Friday. They won that game 56-37. And those two teams, Franklin and Springboro, they're going to square off right after the new year, Tuesday, January 3rd. That one is surely going to be interesting.
That might be one I have to make the trip up to see because I'm excited to hear what happens in that game.
Yeah, a lot of talent with the Rosside twins at Franklin, as well as the freshman that seems to be playing so well for Franklin, Luke Kennard, and then Maverick Morgan, who's receiving a lot of Division I scholarship offers all across the country, really. I heard he's got one from USC at this point.
Yeah, and the way he's playing to start this season is making a lot of schools think long and hard about giving him more looks and more offers, because I've talked to several college coaches who really like what they're seeing out of him right now.
Yeah, they know they can't teach 6'10".
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we're going to break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit of girls' high school action, some things going on in the area over the past week, as well as talk about some local college action. We'll also preview the week ahead and also maybe even the weeks ahead with the Christmas break. We're going to take a timeout from the podcast over the break. So let's take a timeout right now from this week's podcast. We'll be back. This is Rich Hoyt and Rick Brewing on Cincy Hoops Talk. Back here on Cincy Hoops Talk, Rich Hoyt and Rick Brewing. We're going to move on to some girls' high school basketball action. A lot of things happening around the area. And Rick, you were able to hear a little bit about the top two teams in Northern Kentucky who squared off last week, Boone County and Newport Central Catholic.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the premier matchup of talents that you had, but still a big-time Division I talent in Sydney Moss going against the team that's sort of been their arch nemesis. It's been Boone and Newcat, it seems like, every year at the top in Northern Kentucky in the 9th region. Yeah. This year could be the same way. There's a couple other teams in the mix. Newcat's a little bit younger and had a lot of turnover from their team that won the region last year. But once again, they play Boone County very tough. 50-47, the Rebels squeak out the win on the hill. Aubrey Mensch playing big time for the Breads right now. 21 points in that game. She's a tall wing, a lot of speed and athleticism. Always been a high potential player. And this year she's really put that into some more consistency and production for them as she's been scoring the ball really well. Nikki Kiernan, the sophomore talent in the post, had 10 points while battling with Miss Moss, who's headed to Florida on a full ride. Sydney Moss had 21 points. Zuri Hill transferred to Boone County, who's also a very good talent. Could be getting some offers as well, maybe at the Division II or low D1 level. Scored 11 as well. So an exciting game there. Again, Newcat just shows Ron Don, Georgie Stahl is his assistant, seems to find a way every year to, regardless of how much talent they have, put it together. Girls know their roles. They play great defense, and they play tough teams like Boone County, very, very tough, and only allow 50 points. So a fun one to be there that night. I know the fans said it was a really fun game to watch as far as girls basketball goes, and I'm sure we'll see them, those teams, surface around the top once again in the 9th region.
Yeah, the one big one I wanted to mention, how about the GMC matchup this past Saturday? I mentioned earlier in the year how interesting and how much talent the GMC has with girls basketball this year, and it was on display on Saturday. Rashawn Gaffney, the top senior in the Cincinnati area who's signed with Virginia, she puts up 44 points against the area's top team, Jill Phillips' Princeton Vikings, but the Vikings were able to make a nice comeback in the second half to defeat Fairfield 69-65. And not just impressive that Gaffney put up those 44 points, but she added 17 rebounds. And probably even most impressive, 18 for 18 from the foul line. We talk so much about how free throw shooting is such a lost art with kids today. So for Gaffney to get there 18 times and make every one of them is quite a number.
Especially when you look at, and when people say, you know, how does a girl come up with a 40-point game, whatever? That's how. You get to the free throw line and you make them. And that's what she did. I mean, you get 18 points from the line, you're going to have a big night. And she can do it all. So she had a really big night with 44 points. That's impressive.
Yeah, she certainly carried that team. Princeton gets the win, though, and their sophomore stud, Kelsey Mitchell, she had not too bad of a night herself, 31 points for Princeton, and the Vikings move to 7-0 on the year. So, again, if any of you are interested in girls high school basketball, get out and see a GMC game because there is a lot of good teams, a lot of talent. Sycamore, Lakota East, all really good teams, and just mentioned Fairfield and Princeton, who's probably going to be ranked really high when the AP poll comes out soon. Moving on to our local college action. Big weekend in Oxford, Ohio. Really nice doubleheader sweep for both the Miami men and women's teams. The men defeated a really good Belmont team, a team that's dominated the Atlantic Sun in recent years. Charlie Cole's team wins that game on Saturday 66-61, and maybe a nice win like that can really get that team going. They've struggled of late. They're going to host Evansville on Tuesday night before heading to Columbus to play the Buckeyes. They'll certainly get challenged. They play Ohio State on December 22nd.
Mark it down. They'll play them tough. Mark it down.
They will play them tough.
That'll be a low-scoring scare for the Buckeyes. Mark it down.
And Thad Matta knows that they'll play them tough as well. Maria Fontana Rosa's women's Red Hawks are also, they were winners on Saturday. They're now the winners of 3 in a row. They beat Cincinnati in the first game of that doubleheader, that women's women's doubleheader. They won that game 74-69. The Red Hawk women's team now 7-3. They're going to play host to a couple games over the holidays. They will play Northeastern on Monday night and host Chicago State on December 28. Got to mention Thomas More women's team again. Jeff Hahn's Saints team continues to roll. They are now the winners of 6 in a row. They defeated Wittenberg on Saturday 78-62. They're most likely going to take their place back in the D3Hoops.com top 25. They fell out momentarily. That poll will come back out early this week, and Thomas More will likely be in that. The Saints travel to Bluffton on Tuesday night before breaking for Christmas and playing in the D3Hoops.com Classic. Really, it looks like a nice, interesting kind of round-robin tournament out in Las Vegas. Thomas More opens up that Classic with the 14th ranked team in the D3Hoops.com poll, Wisconsin Whitewater. That's on December 28th. They play another really good team, Simpson, on the 30th, and that's all out in Las Vegas.
We're giving D3Hoops.com all types of run today on the podcast.
Yeah,
I like it.
D3 Hoops, let's talk about that for a minute, because Division III, those kids, obviously they're not the most talented basketball players that we have in our country, but those are kids that enjoy playing the game.
You talk about doing it for the love.
They do it for the love, because they're certainly not getting a scholarship for it.
And they're not getting fans in the stands in most cases either.
No, they're not. That Thomas More women's program. Of course, things really got going with Brian Neal there, now an assistant at Xavier. Jeff Hans is really doing a nice job in his first year at the helm. Looking ahead to this week, Rick, we got a few interesting Ohio River matchups. Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky schools doing battle. On Tuesday, really one of the big ones that I'm interested in, Covington Catholic plays at Winton Woods on Tuesday night.
Yeah, and then on the same night, North College Hill is going to be at Newcath, like we talked about earlier. So you're going to have one Northern Kentucky team going across the river, one Cincinnati team coming across the river. I could very easily see a split in these two games.
Yeah, and then Friday night, you've got a couple GCL schools coming over to play a couple Catholic schools in the Northern Kentucky area, and these are schools that really go way back.
Yep.
Roger Bacon, Newport Central Catholic, they play on Friday night, the 23rd, that game at Newcath. And then also in Park Hills, McNick plays at Covcath Friday night as well.
Yeah, and real quick on that Newcath team, I talked about them earlier. They might be the best 0-2 teams in the state right now.
Yeah.
They might be the best 0-4 team in the state here at the end of the week, because they're playing two decent teams from across the river, and those are not guaranteed wins with this young team.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, College Hill beat Bacon about a week or so ago, and and that's certainly going to be a challenge for Newcath. And Bacon's really starting to play well though the past week or so. Rick, over in Northern Kentucky, what else are you looking forward to this week?
Well, two things. I think the Lloyd Memorial Invitational Tournament, always one of the best. The LMI team,
biggest too.
They have, it goes on but it's so well organized. It's unbelievable. They've got two gyms. Games are going all day, literally for like 5 straight days. And it's unbelievably well done. There's good competition. There's some small schools. There's some bigger time teams. It always makes for a good finals of the tournament. The final day of the runner-up game and the championship game, always great games. So they do something right to get it that way. I love watching this tournament. You get to see a lot of teams that you may not get to see all the time.
I looked at the schedule. I counted 31 games, 31 high school basketball games from December 26th through December 30th, consisting, we've got Northern Kentucky schools, Connor, Mason County, Newcath, Brossart, Lloyd, Holy Cross, Cooper, and a lot of other good teams from other parts of Kentucky.
Yeah, and that's why I love it, because you get some great teams from down the state. You know, Bryan Station, when they were good a couple years ago, came up and played in it. Mm-hmm. And you had Holmes versus Bryan Station, which could have very well been a state championship type game in the finals of the LMIT. But you're also, on the beginning of the tournament, you're watching Lloyd and Cooper and teams like that. So it's really fun to see a great wide range of teams. But also this year, I'm going to help out a little bit doing some PA action at the first ever Connor Invitational for the women over the Christmas break. So the 27th to 29th, I'm going to spend the day there, cover some girls hoops, do some PA, and really see a new tournament that Coach Stam has done a great job putting together. He's got Highlands, Connor, Newcath on the girls' side. So, and then he's bringing in some great teams from down in the state of Kentucky as well. So a great group there and some good girls basketball. It's going to be fun to watch.
And you're adding to your resume, Connor Invitation, the voice of the Connor Invitation.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going that far on it, but I'm going to help Coach Stam out, and I'm anxious to see some very good girls basketball. So it's a good opportunity to get out and see a lot of games over those several days.
Excellent. Over in the Cincinnati area, we talked a little bit about the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky matchups, Cuffcath and Winton Woods on Tuesday, as well as North College Hill and Newcath on Tuesday. Those, I think, are going to be interesting. Also, I mentioned it a little bit earlier when I was talking about GMC action. Lakota West, Lakota East is always an interesting game. Lakota East had a tough loss to Oak Hills on Friday night. Lakota West still don't know how good they are to this point. They've only played 2 games. So, you know, and that's a rivalry game, so you know how those rivalry games go. They're always going to be battles. And then out in the Southern Buckeye League, a matchup that I think might be interesting is Goshen and Georgetown. I think those are 2 really well-coached teams. Scott Wake at Goshen and at Georgetown, you know, they're always well coached and state championship well coached. Obviously, those are 2 young teams as well, still in their infancy stages of their development. So we'll see who can develop the fastest there. And then the one that I'm not going to say a whole lot about now. I want everybody to check out my blog on Thursday, but there's a big matchup Friday night over on Montgomery Road. A couple of our top teams in our Cincy Hoops Talk Super 15. Middletown goes to battle with Moeller on Friday night. Again, a lot of talent is going to be on that floor. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the blog, so check that out on Thursday.
CincyHoopsTalk.com.
That's
Got
right.
the blog name in there. Make sure you visit it.
Yep, check out the main page, CincyHoopsTalk.com. That is going to be one of my top 3 games of the season. You know, one of the ones I talked about leading into the season. And, we'll talk about that on Thursday on the blog, so check that out. Well, Rick, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We're going to take a couple weeks off from the podcast over the holidays, but I will be blogging, as I mentioned, throughout the holiday season. Rick will be reporting on some stuff as well. We'll be tweeting. You can follow my tweets at Cincy Hoops Talk. And obviously check us out online at CincyHoopsTalk.com. I retweet a lot of Rick's stuff as well. His Twitter, feel free to follow that, NKY Sports Blog. Well, that's your website.
Yeah, NKYSportsblog.com is the website. At NKYSportsblog is the Twitter. I'll have all types of great content coming up this week as we get into these holiday tournaments. And we're also starting to figure some things out, see where teams stand. So we'll be talking about that as well.
Absolutely. I'll also preview this coming Friday's action, Thursday and Friday's action on that blog on Thursday. A lot of action Thursday night this week as well as Friday. And that's going to do it. I want to wish all of you a happy holidays. We thank you all for listening, and we will see you again in 2012. Signing off, this is Rich Hoyt and Rick Broing for Cincy Hoops Talk on CincyHoopsTalk.com.